You know, you just reflect on life sometimes and you're just like, what the fuck am I doing? Hi guys, it's Bria and welcome back to my channel, Tales of Tales. So today we're going to be doing my quarterly wrap-up. So if you've watched some of my previous videos, you know I'm not a reader that reads like 10 books a month. You know, that's just not who I am, and that's just not what my lifestyle is conducive to. So I felt like, so I wasn't doing little 3 or 4 book wrap-ups every month, that I would just do a quarterly one. So today I'm going to be reviewing all the books that I read in January, February, and March. So for January, the first book that I read was China Rich Girlfriend by Kevin Kwan. So this is the second book in the Crazy Rich Asians trilogy. And for those of you who don't know, Crazy Rich Asians just follows a girl named Rachel who ends up dating a very rich, kind of like socialite in, you know, the Singapore social circle. And she's just kind of like awakened to what it's like to be that rich, because he is very rich, and it goes through her kind of like trials and tribulations with his family. So what I like about this book and what I don't like about this book are kind of the same thing. So let me explain. The world building here is what makes this series so good. You feel like you're so you know, just really immersed in this like rich world of like fine jewels and shopping and money, which I love because, you know, I'm just going to manifest all the riches into my life. Why not? But that also means that it lends to a lot of details when it comes to like these shopping trips and these, you know, extravagant, you know, events, those types of things. And sometimes I felt like it wasn't necessarily needed. So this book is over 450 pages. And like I said, while I enjoy the world building, and I feel like that's what makes the series so good, I feel like there were certain parts that probably could have been taken out, and I probably would have enjoyed it a little bit more if it was just a tiny bit shorter. But nevertheless, I still read all 465 pages. So that tells you that I didn't struggle through it that much, you know. So that's like a little nitpicky thing. At 3.5 to 4 out of 5 stars. I will continue on in the series and I'll read the third book in the trilogy, but I did enjoy it. Next thing I read was a series of short stories called Forward, the Stories of Tomorrow. They just kind of follow literally what tomorrow could look like, you know, just a little bit of today with a little bit more of like kind of like a sci-fi element of things that just aren't too far off of the realm of possibility, depending on how you think about it. And so what made me interested in this was because the authors that he picked, that he curated into this selection, are just top notch, and I just had to read them, and they're short stories, so you know, why not? Okay, so how I'll do this is I'll rank them from least enjoyed to most enjoyed. So the short story that I liked the least was Randomize by Andy Weir. Randomize follows this couple that essentially just tries to bamboozle casinos. They've figured out a way to generate like these winning numbers to win a whole bunch of money, and things that kind of just ensue from there. Some things that they aren't expecting happen, and they have to try to work around it. Expecting a little bit more from Andy Weir when it came to this type of story, but fell a little short for me. So the next book on the list would be Arc by Veronica Roth. So I don't think I've actually ever read anything by Veronica Roth, and while this story wasn't bad and I still really enjoyed it, just compared to the other short stories on the list, this just fell towards the bottom for me. So Arc just follows, it's kind of the end of the world, and there are some last people left on Earth to try to take some samples before like an asteroid hits, and they just need these samples to help build another life form on another planet. Short story on this list would be Summer Frost by Blake Crouch. Again, a little surprise because Blake Crouch wrote Dark Matter. Again, one of my favorite books of all time. Also on my list of favorite things to read in 2020. But Summer Frost follows like a video game developer, and he creates like an AI, and AI keeps learning, and like most AI stories, probably just kind of goes a little too far, a little off the wall, and you know, they just have to try to rein it in. This was the longest of the short stories, and I felt like it didn't really need to be. Okay, and so the next three, what is that? What is that? So the next three on this list I really loved. So we'll start with The Last Conversation by Paul Tremblay, a woman who just wakes up and has no idea who she is. So one of the things that I love most in books is memory loss. Like when people forget stuff and they have to uncover their memory, I'm in it. And I said a woman, it's actually a man in this perspective. And so he's going through the motions. He's in a room where things are being told to him about his past life and who he is, but something just seems a little off to him. And so we follow his story of why it seems off and how he got into this room and just a little bit of backstory behind it. And I wasn't expecting the end, and I really enjoyed it. Then we have You Have Arrived at Your Destination by Amar Towles. Hope I'm saying that correctly. You Have Arrived at Your Destination follows a couple who gets to pick the future of their unborn child. So think about it as in, like, you know, today there's, you know, rumblings of designer babies. And in the story, it takes it a step further where you can kind of see the characteristics of your baby and what their life might look like depending on, you know, which child, egg, embryo that you choose. And so the last story, which was my favorite out of all of them, was Emergency Skin by N.K. Jemisin. So if you've read anything by N.K. Jemisin, you know that she is the sci-fi queen. So in this story, we follow an explorer who skedaddles on down to Earth. And while they're there, they are there to get some samples, to, you know, do some observations of people on Earth. It makes them start thinking about the life that they've lived on their planet, why lies have been told to them, and just them grappling with that and accepting that, and then deciding what they have to do from there. I don't want to get too much into it because, again, these are short stories, so me giving too much of a synopsis I feel like might ruin something for someone, so I don't want to get too deep in there. But it was amazing, like all of N.K. Jemisin's work. Like I said, I gave the whole collection 4 out of 5 stars. So the next book I read in January was Lexicon by Max Berry. So Lexicon follows a group of people who can control people by words. It gives you a semblance of magic. It makes you feel like something magical is happening, but there's no actual magic going on. People are just using their words. They're trained to use their words to control people. And so if you like a school setting, you might like this because we follow a main character who goes into a school to learn how to be a poet. And poets are these people that have an innate ability to already influence people by their words. And so they're sent to these schools to get trained to even just heighten that ability even more, and are essentially just used as like assassins slash people that are just going on like covert missions and operations and things like that. While the premise of this was really good and I was really enjoying it up until maybe like the halfway point, but then after that it kind of just fell flat to me. I was expecting a lot more than what it was giving me, and at the end I kind of was just like very unsatisfied. There's more that I could have known about the characters. There's more, the storyline could have went a little bit more in depth at the end, and it just made me sad. So yeah, so I ended up giving this book 3 out of 5 stars. Again, nothing horrible. This book is, I'm sure, great for, you know, a lot of people, and 3 out of 5 stars for me is not bad. It means that I enjoyed it. It just wasn't my perfect cup of tea. There was nothing inherently wrong with the story. It just lacked something for me. So if the premise is something that interests you, then I would definitely recommend you pick it up. And if you do, let me know how it turns out for you. Okay, and so the last book that I read in January was actually for a video I was going to post, but my camera hated me and decided to make this little ticking noise, and it ruined the entire video. But that book is The Notebook by Nicholas Sparks. So I have actually never read anything by Nicholas Sparks previous to this, and I had also never seen The Notebook previous to this as well. And I know it's just a lot of people just love these like little love stories, so I was like, let me see what it's about. And I have a bad case of FOMO with a lot of things in life, and I'm just like, well, I want to laugh and cry and feel all the love feelings too, so I picked up The Notebook. And I don't understand. The book is very short, so you just get a very surface level understanding of the two main characters' love stories, and you know that they were in love in high school, and then you know that they meet again in the future, and all the lovey-dovey feelings come back, and the main female character has to make a decision between, you know, the life that she's currently living and the love of her life that she met in high school. That was it. So my hope going into the movie was that we were going to get a little bit more backstory on their love story in high school so that I could understand why these two people felt so drawn to each other. And I will say that in the movie we did get that. I feel like the chemistry between the two characters in the movie were phenomenal. So I get why people thoroughly enjoyed the movie. The book was just very subpar to me, and I rated 2.5 out of 5 stars. It was a cute love story, but as I have started to read a little bit more romance, I'm like, okay, I need something else. And I didn't get that something else. So 2.5 out of 5 stars. Thank you so much. And that is it for January. So not a horrible reading month, you know. It got me geared up into reading some more things. So let's move into February. So the first book I read in February was The Wedding Date by Jasmine Guillory. So The Wedding Date follows two people who ended up meeting in an elevator, and they strike up like a fake dating situation. He needs a date to his best friend's wedding, and his best friend just happens to be getting married to his ex-girlfriend, and he's like, I don't want to go to this wedding by myself, and this cute girl that I just got stuck in an elevator with, why not invite her to the wedding? So they go to the wedding together, and because this is a romance story, you can probably assume some of the things that happen from there. The main character is black and her love interest is white. I like the fact that we just didn't skip over that fact. I think sometimes in books with interracial couples, while it's not always like a big deal, I think in real life interracial couples, there are topics that come up, there are issues that come up in their relationship that are just how life works, you know, with the way that our society is. There are issues that come up for interracial couples, and so I like the fact that it wasn't harped on in this book, but it was mentioned and it wasn't ignored, and I really appreciated that fact. So if you're looking for just like a cute, you know, little love story, rom-com-y type of situation, this was a great book, and I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. Up next in February, I read One of the Good Ones by Maika and Maritza. So One of the Good Ones follows the sisters of Kezi, and Kezi is a teen social activist. She has a YouTube channel where she literally just talks about, you know, social activism, and when she becomes a victim of police brutality at a rally, she gets this title of One of the Good Ones. There are also 2 timelines in this story. So there's one that's, I think it's set about 65 years in the past, and then the present as Kezi's sisters go on this like road trip, and they get to know her a little better through these places that she wanted to visit. And then 65 years in the past, it kind of just explains some of the history of their family and the destinations that Kezi had wanted to visit and the map that the sisters are following. So I a lot of thoughts about this. So the first half of this book had me feeling very emotional, more emotional than I thought it was going to, because of the whole police brutality aspect of it. And it kind of took me by surprise. I think, you know, being a Black person in America, I am faced in the media all the time with Black people experiencing police brutality, and I am no fool to think that it couldn't happen to me. And seeing that in here just made me feel a lot of emotions that I just wasn't initially expecting going into this book. And then the second half had me for a doozy. Let me tell you, there is a plot twist in here that I just like really wasn't expecting. It was good. I just wasn't expecting it. I was going into this book thinking it was like a straight up YA contemporary, and while a lot of it is, there's a little aspect of it that might change the genre. And I don't want to give it away because I feel like it's such a good like added aspect to it that I don't want to give it away. While I wasn't expecting it, and while I still feel like it was a good plot twist, part of me feels like it was a little out of place. Like I was just kind of like, whoa, what did I just read? But overall, I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. If you're looking for something that's a little different than your normal YA contemporary, something that'll give you a good lens into a few different Black experiences, I think you will enjoy this book. Last book I started and finished in February was Concrete Rose by Angie Thomas. So if you've read The Hate U Give, if you've read On the Come Up, then you know that Angie Thomas is that bitch. Let's just say it. Concrete Rose follows Maverick, which is Star's dad, and if you read The Hate U Give, then you are familiar with Star. But it follows his story being a young man in Garden Heights and the decisions he has to make as he becomes a young father and is essentially raising a child by himself. And the decisions, you see the roads that he could take, the roads that he wants to take, the roads that he feels like he has to take. And it just explores like his thought process of how do I provide for my family the best way that I know how to. And I think that the narrative in this story is so good because I think we rarely see a single father in general, nevertheless a young Black single father, because in this book he's raising this child by himself, and he's a young man and he's almost a child himself, so him having to raise another human being is obviously like a shock to his reality. This book also talks about the system of generational, like how gang violence, how gang culture, and how the system of incarceration actually affects people in certain communities, and how much it takes sometimes for people to actually like get out of that like system and get out of that type of environment. And you know, it's not easy for everybody. So this book was phenomenal. One like caveat, because when I tell you my star rating, you're gonna be like, but why didn't you give it a perfect star rating? There was one relationship towards the end that is connected to The Hate U Give that I would have just loved to dive in a little deeper. And while I understand that this story is meant to focus on Maverick and his trials and his tribulations and his family life and that dynamic, I would have liked to just see that explored a little bit more. So while that's to me why I still enjoyed the book, and that was kind of a trivial thing because everything else was phenomenal, I gave this book a 4.5 out of 5 stars. So the next book I read, I actually started in February but then finished until March, was Muted by Tami Charles. So Muted follows a young woman who is trying to make it in the music industry, but she realizes that it's just not all peaches and cream, it's not all shits and giggles, it's not all flowers and daisies. You know, she realizes that there is a dark side to this industry. This book is written in verse, And while I'm starting to like books that are written in verse, the way that this was written wasn't my favorite. So I'll try to show you guys like a page. In this book, it kind of takes you like on a little a journey while you're reading. So it does a lot of things like, I think you guys can see that. So you'll read, and then like a word will be going down the page, and then you'll do this, which I think for some books that really works, and I don't think it detracted necessarily from this book, but it made me like stop and think a little bit more about what I was reading, where I don't think that necessarily needed to happen. But the story itself was really great. Yeah, so if you're just looking for a quick read, enjoy things about the music industry, Black people's experiences within that music industry, then you will probably enjoy this. Also, if you like things written in verse. And the next book I read was Girl, Woman, Other by Bernadine Evaristo. So I don't have the physical copy, so I'll put a picture up here on the screen. My mom actually wanted to borrow it once I told her what it was about. So I read this book as part of the Crusty Book Club with Chanel over at Chanel Time. So I was a co-host for the club, and we talked about this book. So this book follows a series of women all throughout different generations, Black women in the UK to be specific. It talks about their stories dealing with relationships, whether it be romantic ones or familial ones. So there's a lot of mother-daughter relationships in this. There is a lot of commentary about, you know, just how being a woman and how being a Black woman affects, you know, your life in almost all aspects of the sense, you know. And the cool thing about this is all of the stories end up being connected somehow. A lot of the women go through like certain traumas and certain hardships in their life that are discussed in the book. And this book, it really made me hold a mirror up to my experiences and how I view other people's experiences, right? So I think in being a Black person, I could relate to some of these stories, but in other aspects I couldn't, because these women, a lot of them were from, like, they're based in the UK. Some of them were immigrants, and it made me realize that I think a lot of Americans, we have a very narrow-minded view of like what racism is because of what we experience in America. And so this just made me realize that I need to do a little bit better about opening my eyes about what racism looks like in countries outside of my own, because I think the Black experience isn't just the Black experience in the US. There's the Black experience in Africa. There's a Black experience in the UK. There's a Black experiences. There are vast amounts of experiences whereas a lot of those experiences have some overlap in what we deal with day to day. Some of those experiences are also very different. So I think that part of it and me just opening up my eyes really made me enjoy the book. So there are two things about this book that I think are worth noting. So the first one is there's like 0 punctuation in this book. And for some people, I know that that's going to be a hard thing to get over, because I know we talked about in the live show, a couple people were like, where's a comma, a period, anything, you know? So if you feel like that might be a struggle for you, I would recommend reading it or listening to it on audio, because then I don't think you recognize it as much. Well, as I read it with my physical eyes, I just kind of got used to it after the first 15 pages, and it made it seem like someone was telling me a story. So again, which might lend itself better to audio, but once I got used to it, I actually enjoyed it, and actually made me get through the story a bit faster. The second thing that I think is worth noting in this is, as I mentioned, a lot of the women in these stories, they go through some type of trauma in their life that is talked about, and it was a little bit of a miss for me. And it's a miss for me in not just this book, but in a lot of books where we talk about traumas, especially Black people going through traumas, is how they work to overcome it, right? I think in this book we talk about the traumas, and then we kind of just skip to when they're better and when they're over kind of what happened, or maybe they're not over it, but we don't revisit it again, and we don't revisit how they overcame some of the struggles or what their struggles were. It just goes from trauma to I'm better now, and it was just something that happened in my past. And so that's just like a critique that I think I have for a lot of books that talk about trauma. So it's not just this one in particular. But yeah, like I said, I think those two things are just like worth noting if you're gonna get into the book. Like I said, I still think it's a great book. It gave me a lot of insight into things that I wouldn't have gotten insight into otherwise. So I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars, and I still recommend it for you to read it if you're interested in it. All right, and the next book I read was Everybody Looking by Candice Iloh. So Everybody Looking follows a young woman who is just like on this journey really to figure out who she is away from the pressures of her family. So she goes to her first year at a HBCU, and a HBCU is a historically black college or university. And you know, before she had went to college, she had felt all of these pressures from her family, especially because her parents you know, just expected a lot of her out of her being the oldest, and because her family was traditionally from Africa, I think Nigeria to be specific. So the expectations they had on her were just like really high. And so when she gets to college, she realizes like, whoa, I was sheltered from a lot of things. There are things that she kind of already knew about herself, but were confirmed when she got to college, and she was able to actually explore those parts of her identity that she wasn't able to do before. This book is also written in verse, so it only took me like 2 hours to read. Very quick, but still got straight to the point, and it like still made you have some drummings of emotion, especially if you've been to college or you've had an experience where you've kind of gotten to get away from what you grew up with, and your eyes are kind of opened about who you are and you know what you kind of want out of life and what's important to you. Then I think you'll find, you know, something that you can relate to in this book. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. Like I said, if you're looking again for something that's quick, something that's still phenomenal even though it's super fast, I highly recommend Everybody Looking. This last book that I read in March, I'm not going to get too deep into it because this is actually a part of a TBR I have coming up in a video that you guys have not seen yet that I'm still currently working on. But that is The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. So what I will say about this book is that it's very short, but it kind of took me by surprise. I was thinking I was going to get through it so fast because it was so short, but the writing of it and like kind of the idea of it was just different than what I thought it was going to be. And not in a bad way. It was just, it's a very quirky book, and it makes you think about what you don't know. Understand why this is such a renowned and loved book in the sci-fi community. That is it for my quarterly wrap up. Let me know down below if you've read any of these books, if you agree with my ratings, or if you plan on reading any of these in the future. And like always, if you made it to the end of this video, you're my favorite, and I hope you have a good day. Bye.